Hello. Today I'm rebuilding these very crusty 90s katana mikuni carbs, and I hope to show you some of the stuff that I've learned along the way getting here. I am using very carefully applied force with a big and correct sized screwdriver to crack open those Phillips screws, which are usually stuck on old carbs which have never been rebuilt, which is usually all of them that you ever touch, unless you rebuild them yourself. The Phillips heads, they will strip out because they're so well stuck on there, and so you have to like push down on them while screwing them out.
I think those jets are jammed. Do that.
You could use a impact driver. I have never had much luck with those, but you want to make sure that you avoid stripping the head, because if you do, then you have a mess and not a couple of carburetors. Let's say you do strip those heads because, you know, Phillips is the worst fastener ever. Well, then instead of using some sort of screw remover thing, I would, in this particular case, recommend just cutting out space for a flat head with surgical motions of an angle grinder or a Dremel cutting disc, and then having space enough for the flat head will save you the time and aggravation of using a screw extractor. Yeah. I'm doing one carb at a time to keep screws and jets and springs and whatever where they came from, because you know, if you mix those up, maybe it's not a big deal. They do look the same, but maybe they are really not the same, and they kind of match to the part, and then you get new problems. Maybe you crisscross some parts that are problematic, and say you did have, and you didn't know it, a problem with cylinder 1, and now you've crossed the part that makes the problem into cylinder 2. Or worse, maybe both cylinders now have problems because you took some problematic parts and contaminated another cylinder or another carb, basically, because you didn't assemble the right thing into the right place. So some people, they use like a organizer box or something to take the whole thing apart and then clean it and then put it all back together. Some people don't care, but I find it really confusing to go through if I just put it all on the table, or if I have it in different boxes. It's a lot easier and also kind of more methodical, because then once I've done one carb, I can repeat that action on the next and the next and the next carb, and think less and less and do better and better at it every time. You know, like with any repetitive but complex action, you do it once and now you know what you're doing, and the rest can sort of go on autopilot. However, if this is your first time rebuilding your carbs, you should know that most people end up rebuilding their first carb about 3 to 4 times, because hey, if it's worth doing once, it's worth doing 3 times. Once you got the carbs open, basically all you need to do is clean the carb using carburetor cleaner, brake cleaner, electronics cleaner, and paper rags, wife's toothbrush, Q-tips, compressed air, whatever you got handy. I've been tried a bunch of different things. Carb cleaner is obviously a nice choice. Electronic cleaner is great, but dries up way too fast to actually wash out stuff, unless you want to do it quickly and use a lot of it. You want to also take out all the jets and the float mechanism and the needle valve, and basically inspect and clean those parts. You have to clean it off of everything before assembly. We're not talking about little fat, like if you, or finger fat, like if you were painting. We're talking about all kinds of dirt and even the tiniest hair just stuck in one of those jet openings could cause the weirdest problems. Like, well, you know, the bike starts up fine, but when I give it a bit, suddenly it drops off, or yeah, one of the cylinders not burning fully, I don't know. Yeah, you want to also check that the floats do float, and some people also check that they don't leak by letting them sit an hour in some liquid. Some people put them in sonic cleaners. I don't have one of those. Maybe I would use that if I had it. I don't know. But I just put them in some like floats and some water, and I put them underwater and I see if there's any bubbles. Because if there aren't any bubbles, then there can't be any leaks, can there? Yeah, and inside of these carbs was the worst I've seen ever. And these carbs aren't even that old, or that filthy, or that corroded on the outside. Yeah. I'll tell you a little bit more about what I found inside these carbs a little later on. I used 800 grit sandpaper, wet sandpaper, to clean up those needles that had corrosion. You know, maybe yours won't have corrosion, but it's good to have that. Fine grit sandpaper. Maybe you could have better, even finer grit. And I was very careful to double check that I'd put in the tiny spring back underneath the idle jet. The bowl assembly was directly under a rubber bung which had almost completely disintegrated in 3 of these 4 carbs, and yeah, the O-rings looked okay, so did the diaphragms. So this rubber bung, I don't have a rebuild kit for this set of carbs, and I'm still not sure, frankly, if it's worth one. So the gaskets and O-rings seem okay. The needles and the rubber bugs kind of need replacing. The corrosion on the needles, but you know, we'll see when this project is all back together if I'm gonna put in the money to replace those. Yeah, and I used my wife's toothbrush to clean out residue that wouldn't readily wash or blow out with my trusty blowgun. I used a needle, pretty thick needle, to pick the nasty grit out of some of those jets. I tried to show you some of the residue that you saw inside these carbs. And the first carb I opened had this, it was filled with a gel-like white substance. It probably came out of a mixture of rainwater and fuel and some other crud. The second cylinder didn't really have that much crust, but it has some of it, nothing gel-like. The third one looked like it had nothing in terms of fuel inside, so there was very little residue. And the fourth one had some really weird orange crust, like bright orange crust buildup, which I'm assuming is from the fuel drying up in there.
It puts me in the mind to do something interesting with that microscope. Well, stand.
I have a pretty cheap, small Chinese microscope that runs on USB, connects to my cell phone, and it's really great for looking at these tiny details like the corrosion that I'll show you I found on some of these needles inside this carb. It's kind of fun to poke around inside of this carb with a microscope, because you see the kind of stuff that you don't really see every day.
Nice. Let's see, the thing also has light. Oh, beauty. Look at all that corrosion. Shuffling it out of the way. See how magnetic. Like a dentist for... Actually, I'm Gulliver the dentist in the land of the Lilliputians. Nice. Think I can get a clearer shot of that. It's beautiful. Right, enough fucking around.
So if you're using air tools, and I recommend you do, because just having compressed air around makes things a lot easier for blowing things clean, if only that, and of course for charging your tires, etc., and the all other air tools. But whenever you use air tools, you should use hearing protection, because there's a lot of safety nuts on YouTube, whatever. I'm not a big safety nut, but I do have hearing damage from using the air gun to clean parts, and before I realized what I was doing, I had lost a bunch of hearing. And what they don't tell you about is not the losing of hearing, but the tinnitus, which is a lot less fun than just not being able to hear people. Just hearing this ringing noise that is there constantly all the time. They don't tell you about that. Maybe also maybe you could not get tinnitus and not get worse hearing, but you do maybe lose the ability to distinguish sounds, so that if there's a lot of people talking at the same time, you will not be able to pick up one of those conversations. That kind of sucks. And loud concerts, motorbike riding, and air tools without ear protection have caused all of these in me. So use hearing protection if you're doing these things. I recommend it. I don't really know the history of this car, but judging by what I've seen and what I've been thinking about this, the bike that the carb came off of has probably been heavily neglected before even being even more heavily neglected. It looked like maybe it had been left out in the rain with probably the fuel tank lid been broken open and never fixed, and then the bike was stored outside, allowing the fuel tank to fill up with rainwater. Probably also that rainwater has frozen into ice, and then eventually the fuel valve in the gas tank probably failed and started filling the carbs, and maybe the float valve on one of the cylinders, the one that has this gel-like white substance, it filled stuck. Float valve stuck open and filled the intake manifold, and then with gas and water eventually, and that liquid would slowly trickle down into the cylinder and past the non-pressurized rings, the piston rings, and then it would eventually, the crankcase would fill with fuel and water from whatever cylinder that had intake valves open. So he likely this cylinder which had intake valves open was probably number 4, and you'd get that if you look at the boroscope videos from my first try of starting my bike. That video is out. All this, and also because the throttle plates, they were stuck. When I went to drain the oil from the crankcase, it was full of fuel. The cylinder had some nasty gunk on it, one of the cylinders, and also these carbs had a bunch of kind of white gunky water in them, which would explain why I could never start this bike before doing this rebuild. I don't really have any good explanations for the orange scale on number 4 though. I'm not entirely sure where that came from, but probably some fuel contaminants. This was the hardest video I had to make up until now. I had sound destroyed by charging the camera while filming. I had overexposed details to deal with. The rebuild itself took about 4 or 5 hours. There was way too much footage. It was too much to skip, and I thought I had made a lot of good comments and stories and such along the way. Those are now lost to the ages because even trying to clean up the sound in the video took ages, and just sitting on the fence trying to figure out what to do with this video. There's still stuff here that I'd like you to see, so I'm leaving it in, but I've gone ahead and sped up most of it by 10 times, so that you will enjoy it, and added some of Dominar's great music. So yeah, hope you enjoy it. Well, there you go. My Suzuki GSX-F 600 katanas. 90s mikunis are as good as new, or at least as good as the work you've seen. Please check back later. I'm pretty sure that I'm gonna spend a lot less time producing the next video, which is gonna be, well, it's gonna be on starting this Crusty katana now with these newly rebuilt Crusty carbs. So yeah, hope you like this. It's a little bit different than the other two videos, and I'm hoping to see you again next time. Click subscribe to let me know you enjoyed this content. Goodbye.